This is the Bold Bogey. It's a 3D golf platformer adventure, like if you mix golf with Mario and Zelda. It's a game I've been working on by myself for exactly 1 year, and it's really come a long way. There's been lots of highs and lows, and I kinda want to take you on a journey of how this all started. I've seen other videos like this in the past, and it always gave me motivation, so hopefully other people can see this and think, hey, maybe I can do that too. So before we get to Bogey, we have to get back to where my game dev journey really started, which is when Mario Maker came out, and even more so with Mario Maker 2. I'd really gotten involved in the Kaizo community, endlessly putting in my level codes and Twitch streams, hoping to get my level played and get some feedback.
This level is sick, holy.
That quickly transitioned into making custom Super Mario World ROM hacks, where I honed my design craft even further. Pushing myself to learn new things and finish complete projects.
That level was awesome. That level was so cool.
Around this time, I had started to become burned out in my microbiology career and had a bit of a mild midlife crisis. So after consulting with my wife, I decided to head back to school for a year to do a small intro to game dev certification to see if I really wanted to do this. While the experience wasn't the best, you kind of get what you pay for with community college, I was able to interact with a few teachers who taught me some valuable things. The first was how to use Unreal Engine. We made a bunch of levels across different styles of games that really got me learning different aspects of the engine. The other useful thing was for my design class, where my teacher had us create extensive game design documents for different game ideas we had to come up with. One of the ideas I came up with was a 3D golf Metroidvania. And well, I was playing UFO 50 at the time, and Golfaria and Pin Golf were two of my favorite games on there. But I really wanted to expand on the idea, and the direction my game was going ended up being much different in execution. Towards the end of my first semester, I decided I would start developing my golf game in earnest in January of 2025, and transition to online classes for the second semester just to complete the certificate and save time on having to actually go to class. I picked this style of game in particular for a few reasons. 1. A golf ball does not need any complicated animations. 2. I don't need a ton of super intricate number-based systems like other games might need. 3. I have a lot of experience making platformers. 4. No one has ever made a game like this. With the game design doc finished, it was time to start prototyping. I spent around a week prototyping the core mechanics, how you would launch your ball, and the 4 main power-ups you would be finding throughout the game. First was launching the ball. I implemented a basic mini-golf tutorial I found on YouTube where the longer you charge up, the further you get launched. Since the game is 3D based, I also wanted there to be an element of choosing the angle at which you launch at, so you would really have to think about your shots. In my mind at this point, the game was going to be a lot more precision based, with things like a stroke limit being your health bar. More on that later, but for now we can finally launch our ball around. Now for the power-ups. I had 4 main ones in mind. Water skip, slam, glide, and transform. These were programmed pretty poorly, but you have to be fast and dirty when prototyping. And the point was to see if I could do it, if they were fun, and am I on the right track? I blocked out 4 different level concepts that utilized each power-up, and for the most part, things were working surprisingly well. But I also realized I needed to start coming up with other mechanics for you to interact with. So I made stuff like these bounce pads, boosters, buttons and doors. I started teaching myself basic UI stuff in Unreal. I was taking a Udemy course online to get more in depth with blueprints, and in general I just kept messing around with stuff to get more familiar with the robustness of Unreal. I didn't really have much of a story at this point, and have never really been much of a story guy, so I didn't stress too much about if my world or levels made sense per se. I just wanted to build stuff. The first major thing I built was the Royal Ruins, the water-based temple where you get the ability to skip across water. It's the first temple you go to, which wasn't the best idea, as game devs often say your first things you create are going to be rough, and the first thing a player should see should be impressive. But I just ended up expanding on the prototype I had made for the water skip power-up. I wanted the space to be an interesting, precision-based challenge that had a bit of openness to it, where you would explore a space and solve puzzles. Raise the water level halfway through, and then explore the same space in a new context with a new power-up. We can take a quick detour here to talk about how the game looks visually. I'm not a 3D artist, and I'm not really a great artist in general, but what I do have experience with is repurposing things to give them a new look. A lot of the look of my Mario stuff was down to me reusing or messing around with classic Mario art to create something unique but in a similar style. And because this is the first game I'm making, I didn't want to break the bank or get in over my head with hiring other artists before I really had any idea that this game could go anywhere. So that means I'm using a lot of pre-made assets from stores, which I had started to collect a healthy amount of free stuff from Epic's monthly free drops, and could find more from cheap sales on Humble Bundle. Using pre-made assets is sometimes looked down upon, but I think that's more to cheap games being flipped and not much care being used with them. But for me, these pre-made assets were extremely useful because they helped teach me about a number of different aspects of Unreal, like materials and visual effects. I was not only able to go into these assets and see how they worked, but also use the loads of textures and models they come with in different ways. And as long as I was maintaining a somewhat cohesive look, I had a treasure trove of cool stuff to use. And I should say, I'm also making plenty of my own art for the game. I'm largely using Unreal's awkward modeling tools for any 3D models I need to make. I'm also making a bunch of patterns and different sprite art that I can use on top of other pre-made stuff. Anyways, so for the ruins I had this pack of temple looking stuff that I could use as a foundation. I wanted the game to be very bright and colorful, so I ended up adding a tint to the materials for each of the models. I also started retooling certain models to create prefab objects that were more suitable for my style of game. One of them even looked like a portal. After building the temple, I started building out the two other major dungeons, the Tar Factory and the City. The Tar Factory was all about this tar that made you immediately stick and not roll around, as well as these cool bubbles that you could use for traversal. These bubbles were the first time I really started to find the fun, and also start to understand what the game should actually be focused on, which is doing sick-ass platforming. This idea was reinforced by a couple playtests I did with some friends and family, and every time they got here, they immediately started to understand the game.
Wow.
This is where the action button started to come into play. I needed the player to have some way to interact with objects, and also just something for the player to do while flying through the air. So now boosters require an action button. These billboards in the city need the action button both to stick on and to shove off. Or these spinny boys that swing you around. We were starting to get somewhere. In the midst of building these three major dungeons, I was also building out the hub world. I wanted there to be a space for you to consistently revisit with new powers that would allow you to find new secrets and challenges. And for the most part, it was getting the job done. I added in these sections before the dungeon that acted as a precursor, teaching you about some of the mechanics that would be expanded on in the dungeon, while also getting you acquainted with the area. It was all very reminiscent of classic 3D Zelda games. Around this time, a friend I had worked with on Mario stuff had contacted me and said they made a demo track for the water temple in my game. I was absolutely blown away by their gumption, and the song fit really well for the level. Despite not really having any idea about contracting work, I went ahead and asked them to make music for the rest of the game. And that ended up being a great idea because god dang it, they've been cooking up some juicy jams for y'all. Anyways, there were also these portals I added in that would take you to a completely bespoke level unchained from the limits of other parts of the game. Upon clearing these, you could get a battery that could be spent on additional upgrades at a store. After building out those three dungeons, their entry areas, and a basic hub world, I asked a friend to do a major playtest before moving any further. I had a feeling I was on the right path, but outside opinions are super important. GermDev played through everything I had made at that point, and it largely went super well.
I like the 2D view.
The bits I were confident on were hitting how I imagined, and the things that I was unsure of, I got super valuable feedback on.
So, I find it fairly difficult to get the right angle to actually hit that thing. I would say it's less because of the speed and more because of it's just kind of awkwardly placed for me.
This playtest was around June, and I was hoping to get the game out by the end of the year. I didn't want my first game to be this super long multi-year thing that ends up being a stinker. If it stinks, at least it only stunk for a year. However, that target date was about to change. Throughout development, even when things were going well, I kept having this itch that I couldn't quite scratch, no matter what I made. When watching GermDev play the game, I finally figured it out. I was only emulating one aspect of the concept of golf, the precision game, because I thought about the idea that you could get upgrades to your power meter so you could go faster and farther as you go through the game, but if you could increase your power, then that would break a lot of the obstacles I had already made. or at least the whole game would have to be structured differently. Around the same time, I had made a prototype level where your launch power would be like tripled, and made these gates that would recharge your ability to launch. And immediately I just had a blast shooting around this basic level. It finally clicked that in addition to the precision bits of golf, I needed the feeling of the drive. However, this was a big problem for multiple reasons. I was trying to get it out before the end of the year, and there was just no way I could greatly expand the game in this way and get it out the door that soon. I would have to figure out a way to keep all the stuff I had built and have it make sense. And I have no idea how challenging the optimization will be with a much bigger world. At this point, I had done a pretty good job of following my game design doc and not letting scope creep happen. But I knew that this was something that needed to happen to get the game from decent to great, and from there, we were off to the races. First thing, how do we separate these two forms of gameplay? Easy, we just put giant domes over the special places of interest that when you're in there, you switch to precision mode, and when you leave, you're back out on the fairway blasting around. It felt like such a nice breath of fresh air to get out of a tricky dungeon and get to just bounce around the world and interact with things in new ways with your new powers. There were all these ideas I had in my head with no easy way to expose them until I added this part of the game. Now with even more space in the world, I needed to make more challenges and secrets, more ways to interact with the world and pique your interest. But I needed some sort of deposit and need for these extra challenges to be extra enticing. Insert a classic 3D platformer trope of needing X amount of things to unlock new areas. Explore an area enough to get some batteries and expend them to unlock the dungeons that hold more power-ups and challenges. With batteries also being used in the store for additional upgrades, batteries felt like a meaningful reward for completing various challenges around the world. Now that we had the real structure for the mechanics and systems, the last thing needed before pure production was some sort of narrative. I'm not a narrative guy, and I just really don't like writing sincerely, and so I had no idea what sort of story or narrative I wanted for the game. One afternoon, I just started putting golf balls around and giving them dumb hats and colors and eyeballs, and it kind of just started to click that this was the direction I needed to go in. One of the things I was always proud of in my Mario ROM hacks was that I was able to make people laugh.
God! Oh my god!
So I just made it when you hit these golf dudes that they say some hint about a nearby secret or some dumb joke about the world. From there, I could build out some silly story about the elder golf gods being taken over by some alien or some dumb thing and kind of just wing it as I go. Let's be real, you're not really playing this game for a story. You're playing to shoot this dang little ball around, so let's make it a silly little time. With the narrative set up, it was time to start pumping out content. Around this point in late August, I had around a quarter of the hub world built, 4 dungeons mostly built to varying levels of polish, 3 bosses sorta halfway built, 4 major sub areas, and around 10 or so bonus areas and challenges. As I was building out the beginnings of the side levels, I tried to think about smart ways to build out my mechanics, so they could be easily reused and remixed in a number of different ways. That way, when you stumble upon a mechanic you had previously used, you have a new way of interacting with it. For example, this boinger ball is a pretty basic bouncy guy that resets your launch when boinging off of it. But when you have slam, now you can easily reorient yourself around the ball, or correct a poorly aimed shot to easily redirect into the boinger. Similarly, major gameplay concepts like a mini golf level can easily lend itself to several new versions with additional challenge and mechanics, just by reusing that baseline concept. The environments can also be reused as well in this manner, further reducing dev time while still creating enough variety of levels. And so on, new levels were being built, new mechanics were being created, and visuals were being refined over and over. Shout out to the commenters who gave great ideas to add stuff to the game to make it look way better. My personal favorite style of level I made is the clubhouse, which is all about these 5 rooms that you have to beat in a row, but each time you go through the portal it's a random room, so you never know what's coming. Check out this playtest moment I had.
Interesting. That's so dumb.
Around this time of the year, I was also bringing a child into the world, so naturally things slowed down on the development front. I mean, come on, just look at him. But time only moves forward, and 2026 was approaching. As we tick over into 2026, there's one last major goal for me to work towards. A demo for Steam Next Fest. A demo is a huge boon for any indie game trying to get noticed, and I think I'm close to having a really polished first chunk of the game for people to check out. That'll be happening in February, so be sure to wishlist the game so you can get notified for when the demo launches. I have a Discord set up as well for players to chat about the game and give feedback, so let me know what you think. I'm hoping to launch the game sometime in the spring, and I think I can get there, but nothing's ever 100% in game dev. With how far the game has come since the beginning, it's hard not to stay optimistic about what can be achieved. At the very least, it's been an enormously fulfilling year of learning and creating, and I hope that in the future, my game will bring you joy. Thanks for watching, and make sure to wishlist the game on Steam.